Hi there. In this short topic video, we're just going to give you an outline of the different methods of production that you see in business. Depending on which exam board you're studying for, there's a requirement for you to have an understanding of the different methods of how a business can organise operations and production. What we'll do is we'll spend a couple of minutes on each of the main methods. We're going to cover job, batch, flow production, and finally a type of flow production called process. The key thing here is just to basically understand the differences between the different approaches and methods and one or two of the main advantages and drawbacks of the different methods. So let's go through them. Job production is perhaps the easiest method to understand. If you've ever had a haircut or a beauty treatment or ever had any building work done, then you've seen job production in action. Job production is the operation where a one-off or a small number of items are produced, and nearly always to the customer specification. So a classic example would be a haircut, but of course it can range all the way through to very large, complex construction projects like the building of a motorway or the building of a ship or an aircraft. Now, the key with job production is, of course, that because customer requirements are being handled on an individual or contractual basis, then it enables great specialization. And the key with job production is that if you wish to have very high quality and you're prepared to find someone who can do it for you and you're prepared to pay the price, you can get very high quality. It's often said that employees involved in job production are better motivated or highly motivated because they're getting the job satisfaction from a job well done. And job production is also a very flexible production method. It's easier to handle changes in the requirements of the customer. The downside, of course, with job production is that it's individual, isn't it? The cost is of producing one unit and not a great big batch or thousands of units at the same time. So job production can be high cost. Almost by definition, it's labour intensive. Job production, the nature of the task varies enormously from simple to complex. Moving on to the next method, batch production. What happens here? Well, what happens with batch is that you group similar items together and you make them together. And then when that batch is completed, it goes through the next stage of the production process. So the batch of, let's say, buns here being prepared, in fact these look like they're coming out of the oven. They would have been prepared together, they went into the ovens together, and then they come out together to go through the final stage, which might be a delivery or wrapping up or whatever. The key with batch production is, of course, it starts to bring production together. It enables you to concentrate the skills on each stage of the production process. And if you've got the production process right, each element within that batch should be of the same quality. So that's batch production. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Well, of course, there is still some flexibility in there. It's still possible to offer the customer some choice, but you're making many more together rather than just one. The key benefit of batch production is that you can start to use specialist equipment. You can start to use specialist staff to work on each stage of the production process. And depending on the size of the batch and how many elements there are in the production process, you may even start to get some bulk buying savings in terms of how you buy the elements that go into each stage of the process. Batch production is pretty flexible. If you suddenly get a request for a large quantity to be made, it's normally possible to do it. You don't have to stop the production line, you simply increase the size of the batch. The downsides, of course, by definition, batch production is going to involve more elements of work in progress as the batches go through the production process. So as we move from job to batch, we're likely to be needing high levels of inventory, in particular raw materials and work in progress. And of course, there's always a risk as you start to work on higher quantities here that the work becomes a little bit repetitive. If you're always working on one part of the process, taking one batch, and processing it and then moving on to the same batch coming in again, that doesn't sound like the most interesting, motivating work. So flow production is the next stage. Now, the difference here with flow production is that the product is not moving from one stage to another along with its batch, but it's continuously moving through the production process. And this requires some quite sophisticated production planning. Literally, when one task is finished, the next task must start immediately because the flow or the production flow line can't be stopped or shouldn't be stopped. A key part there of flow production, therefore, is that each task must take the same amount of time. The key benefit of flow production is that it enables very high quantities of output to be produced. So flow production is the most suitable for the manufacture of very large quantities, for example, chocolates. And also, because flow production is quite sophisticated and complex, it's ideally suited to a capital-intensive approach, in particular automation of some, if not all, elements of the production process. It therefore requires less labour and therefore less investment in training and skills. One of the downsides, though, to flow production is because of that complexity in production of setting up the machinery. There's a setup time to get the machinery right, and also there's a significant cost if production is delayed at some stage within the flow. If the flow is stopped at any part of that production process, the entire production line stops. Whereas with batch, if there was a problem with a batch, you could still continue to work on other batches later on or earlier on in the production line flow. So flow production is particularly suitable for manufacture of very large quantities, and also in particular for goods that are not differentiated or not personalized anyway. These are mass market products. And finally, just a word about process production, which is, in a sense, is a sort of specialist type of flow production. This is really about industrial processes that take raw materials and then produce finished goods. And the great examples of these are chemicals, oil refining, and perhaps cement production. The issue with process production is that we are talking about industrial strength, industrial size quantities. So process production is absolutely about the cost-effective production of very large quantities. Most importantly, the products have to be of very consistent quality. The downside to process production, and what makes it unsuitable for most products, is the very heavy investment in the facilities required to achieve the desired quantities and also the desired quality. It's highly disruptive, highly costly if a process production line is stopped in any way. There we go, guys. You don't need to know a lot of detail about methods of production. You just need to be aware of the different approaches, the different methods of production. And what we've done there is just gone through the four main ones there: job, batch, flow and process, to give you a good overview of the different methods of production.